Oh, green has been feeling nice. Disaster loaning us. I'm staring at Sarge for the past 3 hours and he hasn't done anything. Maybe it's been plastered or something. Oh, where have I been? I've been staring at Sarge here. Move, dang it! Who knew a game about toy army men would get a sequel that would be surprisingly better in every way? If you didn't see my last video, I covered Army Men Sarge's Heroes for the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, which it was a pretty alright game. It had some design quirks that sadly hindered the game from greatness in my opinion. It was also some problems coming from the hardware the game was put on. But otherwise, it was a pretty great idea for a game. If you also remember from my previous video, I also talked about the company that made these games, 3DO. I also talked about their history and where they are now. I can tell you where they are now, in the bottom of a giant pit in a cemetery because 3DO is dead. So in case you haven't noticed, for today's game review, I'm covering Army Men Sarge's Heroes 2 for the Nintendo 64, PlayStation, and PlayStation 2. I don't physically own the PlayStation version, but I do have it on my PlayStation Vita through PS1 Classics. Thanks for closing the PSP, PS Vita, and PS3 stores, Sony. I appreciate it, you jerks. I also didn't beat that version like I did these two, so take my PS1 critiques with a grain of salt. Again, like the last video, I'm going to talk about the story, gameplay, soundtrack, and other quirks about the game. In this sequel, through Vicky's news, we hear that if they captured Field Marshal Tannenberg, pretty much the Tan Army's second in command, the Green versus Tan war will be over. That, and they describe that Plastro has disappeared, as seen in the last game, as they assume he has become a victim of plastification. For those who don't know, plastification is the process of an army man staying in the real world for too long, therefore becoming an actual toy, and it was assumed that there was no ways to reverse the effects. On his way to find and capture Tannenberg, Sarge and Riff, his bazooka man, find themselves in a battle with some tan soldiers on a dinner table in the real world. And this is where the game begins. Right off the bat, this game controls way better than its predecessor. At least when talking about the PS2 version. The Nintendo 64 version controls fairly the same when compared to the first game on the Nintendo 64. From what I've played of the PS1 version, the controls are a little better, but I'd say the PS2 version is the superior in that department. Back to the story, once defeating the tan soldiers on the dinner table, Sarge and Riff hop through the portal before it blows up, to head back and talk with Colonel Grimm that the Marshal wasn't even there, only for a girl blue spy named Bridget Blue to be close behind, overhearing what they were talking about. For those curious, yep, Jim Cummings reprised his roles as Sarge, Colonel Grimm, and Plastro again. I still find it funny that the same man who voiced Winnie the Pooh and Pete and other characters did the voices for Sarge in the game. You just don't get these types of voices in games anymore. You do sometimes, but not all the time, and it's sad. To continue, Bridget finds Plastro in the real world and sprays what seems to be some serum she's crafted onto him that undoes plastification. Plastro then springs back to life, just happy to finally be able to move again.
Crab, ouchie, ouchie!
Yep, gotta have some sort of comedic stuff, you know. It's an Army Men game for Pete's sake. Bridget then explains that for giving him and the Tan Army her serum, she wanted some compensation. Plastro, not willing at first, but then budged, just for her. She then shows him into a backpack where they'll get more serum and some quote-unquote super weapons. Take a guess at what the super weapon is. Go on, I'll give you a few seconds. If you guessed fireworks and toy robots, great job. If you didn't, Wario's coming for you tonight. Just wait and see. After that, Colonel Grimm sends Sarge and Vicky to track down some portals that are bringing in some serum, and he wants them to destroy them. They blow up the bridge that leads the serum to the plastic world, and Sarge sees that the serum is still being generated on the other side. So that's when he goes into the portal to stop it. Going back to Bridget and Plastro, they arrive at a toy store where, you guessed it, the quote-unquote super weapons are. This is where they start preparing on relocating the toys and the fireworks to the plastic world. Back to Sarge, he's at a man named Dr. Mad's castle, where some more serum is being generated. Which, I also forgot to mention, Vicky arrives at a graveyard before this looking for some serum as well. She, as we all guessed, gets captured though, and Sarge again needs to go save her. Once Sarge saves her and they return home, they talk to Grimm about how the Tans now have a way of bringing back Plastro. Grimm then tells them that it shouldn't be a problem since the spy told him that the war should be wrapped up before they can even find him. I smell double-crosser.
I have seen him myself, gentlemen.
Whoa, who would have guessed? Bridget pretty much tells them that she found Tannenberg and that once captured, the war will be over.
Sergeant talk, man.
And Sarge, can you not simp for a woman for 2 seconds? The next day, Tenenberg and Grimm are signing a treaty, when suddenly Plastro bursts through with his new toys while, you guessed it again, capturing Vicky. I swear, this has become a bit of a habit for Plastro. It's like a Peach and Bowser situation. It's kind of expected at this point. And hey, congratulations to you, fellow viewer. You've earned a gold star, because you're beginning to predict the story. I might as well just let you tell it. Go on. I'll be right here. Go on. Sarge, after taking down the robots, chases Plastro down through the portal to save Vicky and also stop his plans. He then ends up in a bedroom where the 10 army has been gathering. Where the frick is the family that owns this house during all of this? Do they not see the hundreds of tiny soldiers just piling up in their rooms? If this happened to me, I'd be freaked out. This is when Sarge finds out that Bridget set them up and captured her and confronted her about it. Bridget then overhears that Plastro attacked her homeland, the Blue Nation. Not gonna lie, that's some actual bad guy stuff right there. Plastro's an A tier on my bad guy tier list. He's a little too dorky for a villain, but sometimes he do be liking doing evil things though. Once she figures that out, she tells Sarge and the Bravo Company that she'll take them to Plastro, but first she wanted them to save her hometown. Yeah, I'll pass. You've been kind of a dingus lady. I'm sorry, what? She double crosses again? What the frick? After saving the Blue Nation, Bridget leads you to a toy store. Meanwhile, Plastro is talking to captured Vicky, where Plastro is telling Vicky to marry him. Of course, as you fantastically guessed again, Chiflato tells him no. And then this clip happens.
You'll regret this! I'll nag you! I'll get fat and ugly! I'll run your credit cards to the limit!
Ooh, this game has some surprisingly funny humor too, not gonna lie. And I kind of appreciate stuff like this. Sarge on the toy store's floor then walks over to see Vicky in a gumball machine. Fun. Sarge then rescues her as they go off and stop some rockets that the Tans were about to launch. For those who were wondering when Bridget was gonna double cross again, it's now. Like right now. Like right now. Bridget starts capturing the Bravo Company to gain back the respect of Plastro and get him to renegotiate his terms. He, thrilled, then accepts and flies her over somewhere.
There's your fiance.
Yeah, and he's with your girlfriend.
Dude, again with the funny scenes. Sorry, I'll move on. Sarge then instructs Vicky to go destroy the remaining rockets while he goes off to face Plastro. He climbs on top of a pool table to see Bridget strapped to a bomb. Plastro pretty much telling him to either save her or get him. You guys smell that? I smell an imposter among us. Sarge saves her, but as you've guessed right again, this was all a ruse, as Bridget developed a spray that also causes a sped up version of plastification. Yay. Sarge and the Bravo Company are now put into a pinball machine where they're toyed around with. Get it? Bridget then tells Plastro that she thinks that's enough. Plastro says no, and that's when, to me at least, her intentions are becoming unclear. She whistles to a beat-up tan soldier, who then has a helicopter spray the serum all over the Bravo Company, including Sarge. Sarge, now able to move again, then rescues all the Bravo Company and breaks out of the pinball machine to face Plastro. Plastro then activates a giant robot to attack the Greens, but out of nowhere, a second robot activates, tackling Plastro's robot, and they both tumble to the ground.
That is not one of mine. What is going on?
Yeah, dude, same though. After that, Plastro starts to walk away. Sarge then grabs him and is about to punch him, but Plastro just faints, leaving Sarge disappointed. Me too, buddy. The Greens then take Plastro into their jail, and all is well. Except there's a lead up at the end for a game that I'm probably never gonna play. And that about wraps it up for the story. Yeah, so this game is actually longer compared to the first one, and in many ways, it was a welcome change. Much more game for me to play, right? You also didn't play as just Sarge this time. You also sometimes play as Vicky, and again, kind of a welcome change. I'd like to mention really quick that the game that's supposedly supposed to come after this, it's called Portal Runner, and it's also for the PS2. But you mostly play as Vicky, and Bridget is the villain in that game. I may pick it up at some point for collection's sake, but I'm in no mood to review it, at least not right now. But, on to the gameplay. The PlayStation 1 version of the game controls pretty alright, but something about it just seems off compared to the other version. Maybe it's because I'm playing on a Vita. But hey, at least this version feels more or less designed for the analog stick compared to the first game. The Nintendo 64 version controls are relatively similar to the first game, but with some buttons switched around. Otherwise, it's very close. Also, the analog stick feels very similar to the first as well when controlling Sarge and Vicky. The PlayStation 2 version by far is the best in the controls department. It's actually designed for the analog stick this time. It's using a hybrid of tank controls and traditional movement, but it works surprisingly well while playing. The second stick does turn the camera, but it's kind of wonky in my opinion, so I never used it. Of course, like last time, when playing the Nintendo 64 version, I used the Tribute 64 controller just because it just melted in my hands better. It's just an overall better controller in my opinion, and also remember, I played the PlayStation 1 version on my Vita, and I also didn't even finish the game. So the controls could very well be different from when you play it. When comparing the versions, control-wise, I'd say PS2, PS1, and then Nintendo 64. But the controls are not considerably worse between versions this time around though, and they all feel pretty good to play on. Some of you were probably wondering about the difficulty this time around. Well, here's your answer. It's still hard. I will be honest, this game is easier than its predecessor, but it's definitely not by much. It's still a pretty difficult game, even on the easiest setting. And I hated that bedroom level so dang much. Again, there were obviously some differences between versions. First thing, the Nintendo 64 version actually has an exclusive level to it, and it's called the Walls level, where you play as Vicky. I don't know about you guys, but I actually was kind of disappointed that the Walls level was missing from the other versions, because I grew up with the Nintendo 64 version, and for some reason I kind of liked that level. Another difference is the graphics, obviously, with the PS2 version looking the sleekest. Again, obviously. Lastly, there's the difference in the sounds and music. It again sounds muffled in the Nintendo 64 version, but I felt like it wasn't as bad as the first games, but it's only by a small margin. The PS1 and PS2 soundtracks are surprisingly identical, except where for some reason Sarge's Raid song in the PS2 version sounds cut down and lame, and now I'm sad. Of course, now that we're on to the topic of the soundtrack, let's talk about that sweet, sweet soundtrack. Again, I feel like the music is pretty darn fitting for this game, and it slaps hard. They did a fantastic job on the music, and it gets an 8.5 out of 10 for me for the PS1 and PS2 versions. I still don't get why they swapped where some of the songs play, as well as Sarge's Raid sounds like doo-doo on the PS2 version, but other than that, it's great. The Nintendo 64 version, on the other hand, captures the spirit of the soundtrack, but not quite. Mainly because of the hardware limitations, so it's a 7 out of 10 for the Nintendo 64 version. I will say though, I personally like the first game's music more, but I still totally enjoy the music in this game. So overall, what are my thoughts on this game? Army Men Sarge's Heroes 2, like its predecessor, is a pretty darn good game. If you can find a copy, I totally recommend it. The gameplay, while being pretty difficult and annoying at times, it kept me hooked to play more because of how creative the developers got with this second outing. Which version would I recommend though? This should be an obvious choice. Because it runs faster, it's smoother, the graphics are better, and the music is mostly better, I say the PlayStation 2 version is the one to go for. But ain't got a PS2? Nintendo 64 version will do you just fine. I'd rate this game a 7.5 out of 10. Again, no matter the version. It's fun, takes the cool premise from the first game, and expands upon it in a number of pretty neat ways. So sadly, 3DO's last game was starting development on this. Army Men Sarge's War, aka Sarge's Heroes 3, for the PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, and Microsoft Xbox. Also, sadly enough, 3DO went defunct while developing this. So Global Star Software, as you see their logo there, picked it up and finished it for them. And Sarge's War upon release actually got a lot of mixed reviews, especially since it takes on a darker tone than the past two games. So, well, after reviewing a few other games, such as this one, can't wait to review this one, we'll come back to Army Men Sarge's War and give it the review it deserves. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I deeply appreciate it. Again, I'd like to deeply apologize for how long these videos are taking. College is really strapping me in, a few other things, but hopefully I can get some more videos out. And it's weird that this is popping up on April 1st. This is not an April Fool's joke. It just happened to be uploaded on this day. I normally have an April Fool's joke video, but I don't have one for this year because I wanted to upload this. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Deeply appreciate it. And slay your dragons.